Hello and welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today we will be discussing Who Leads the Leader, an article by past Grand Master of Washington, Alden H. Jones.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Today on the Working Tools Podcast, we have 3/4 of our usual crew. One is Jarrod is having some technical difficulties, but I'm Matthew Appel. I'm a Mason member of Mill Creek Lodge number 243 here in Montlake Terrace, Washington. We have very worshipful brother David Colbeth, who is a member of King Solomon Lodge number 60 in Auburn, Washington, and worshipful brother David Chung, who is a member of Prince Charles Lodge number 153 in Kelowna, British Columbia. Welcome,
Stephen even.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, did I get your name wrong?
Stephen Chung. That's okay. Yeah.
Sometimes I'm David
it's
Chung and sometimes he's.
I'm sorry.
It's only been a while. It's so good.
Yeah, it's been a little while. It's not like it's not written right in front of me when I read it off or anything. But I apologize, worshipful brothers. So
No
with that, I should
problem.
probably just mute myself for the rest of the podcast. And then
You know,
the rest of it goes.
I don't know how many times I've mispronounced your last name anyway, so I'm good with it. I'm
There you
sure
go,
it's just, that's it.
It's a running joke.
Karma
with the guys.
coming back at me.
Exactly. It's a running joke with the guys in my area that there's no R in my last name, but people always want to say Colbeth or Colbeth. It's just, and so they some guys call me the pirate because I say there's no R.
The anti-pirate. So,
well, okay. Sees how, we have to talk about reading. I'll join you guys with this next. Yeah.
Now he's getting serious.
Well, you can't read things. Well, it's easier to read things when there's such fine print.
There's a little bit of shuffling in the background there, Steve. I don't know if your mic is on your desk there.
Yeah, it is. And I put the papers right over top of it, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your
It was
mute's
good.
on.
Listen.
So in an effort to get this train back on the tracks here, today the article we're discussing is Who Leads the Leader, which was written by, as I said earlier, Alden H. Jones, who's a Grand Master of Washington in, I want to say, 1983?
75 is 76.
75? Oh, well, there you go. I looked it up and then I promptly forgot it, apparently.
The article is written 83.
That was it. So, David, this one was your suggestion, so I hereby officially punt it to you. What made you choose this article? Where'd you find it? What's up with that?
Yeah, so thank you, Matt. I'm a frequent reader or enjoy the short talk bulletins, and this was volume 61, number 3 from March 1983 article. And when I was reading through it, I realized this reminds me, the notes I have, it reminds me of a show we recorded recently about the speed of Masonry and the idea of the progressive line, and the quality and a lack of lodge leadership as our own fault, really. If you look at what is leadership or whose leadership, it's really our own fault, because we just assume that we're going to put a guy in a station and he's going to progress automatically and magically become a leader, when really maybe he's just somebody that said, yeah, I can do that. Or he was the next guy that says, I'll do it, or I will. So the article starts off with a series of questions, and that's kind of how we're going to start off here. So the first question is, what is a leadership? So I went to the holy grail of information, of course, Google, and looked at the definition. So the definition of leadership is the action of leading a group of people or an organization. Sure, that was leadership. It's simple, but that's what normally we think of leadership. And then I decided, what are some of the things that describe leadership? And I really like these. Guidance, direction. Not so sure about this one. Management, but yeah, there's some management involved. A lot of times I think management and leadership get crossed, and people think management is leadership, and really it's not, in my opinion. Organization, orchestration, I really like that one. If you think about a conductor in an orchestra, he's not out there blowing all the horns and stringing, strumming all the strings and beating on the drums. He's just guiding them and helping them through the process. And then influence, and of course, a very Masonic word, superintendence. the master's charged with the superintendence of the craft, which essentially is another form of leadership. So what do you guys think? What is leadership?
Well, leadership, I think, you covered that pretty good as to what leadership actually is. But the paper is really who leads the leader, right? So not so much about
we'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so to that point, if we put guys in line because they're usually the guy who's willing to take the role and then naturally progress, and then we hope that he becomes knowledgeable in the craft and learns the lessons that are there to be absorbed as he goes through the chairs and progresses through the line and eventually becomes the worshipful master. And then we find out he really didn't, right? Well, this is really about, who helps him, who leads the leader, because this happens, I think, as a regular practice in most lodges, that there's everybody's just naturally pushed through the natural progression of the line, regardless of whether or not it's helping prepare them or whether or not they're showing their preparedness or that they've learned the things to be the leader, right? And quite often, they're not, and in some cases, like for example, I know a lodge that they put a guy in and they parachuted him in midway in the line, and then they pushed him through into worshipful master. He was not a ritualist. He didn't do memory work from memory. He read everything that he ever had to perform, and when he showed up at his installation and got installed as worshipful master, he brought in a 3-inch thick binder and put it on his podium, and it had everything from the opening ceremonies to visits by dignitaries to you name it. If it was in a lodge meeting going to happen, it was basically the ritual book on steroids, right? And he, in his opening address at his installation, made it quite clear that he was not going to be doing memory work, or the work from memory, and that he had made it clear prior to that, so that there was no doubt in anybody's mind he was not going to be doing memory work, right? But that he was organized and he could lead the lodge, and he had the leadership skills, and in true fashion, he did have the leadership skills. He did lead the lodge. He made a term plan. He executed that term plan, and all the functions went off without a hitch, and so on. And yet he still received criticism for not doing the work from memory, right? So, but he did lead the lodge through his year.
But what do you consider? What is leadership? Separate from the lodge ritual or lodge functions and things. What is leadership like in your civilian world outside of lodge? What do you think? What is leadership? When we talk about guidance and direction, and
somebody who gives proper instruction, who follows it through, who sees that you have the tools to do what he's asked you to do, and then if you don't have them, he assists you in getting properly prepared.
What do you think, Matt? What is leadership when we think about the idea, the overall concept of leadership, whether it's civilian or political, or I don't want to get into political stuff, but when you think about a leader or the ideas of leadership and the leadership traits, what is a leader? What is leadership?
It's probably not a great, so these are things I should think about before we start talking. It's probably not a great definition or anything, but it's somebody who has a vision and can motivate people to moving toward that vision. Mm-hmm. I guess is how I would say it. I know back in my military career, one of the guys who worked for me used to say that it was the getting people to do things that they didn't want to do. That was his definition of leadership. I wouldn't go quite that far, but it's along those lines that you have a vision, a goal where you want to be, and you motivate others to get there.
Yeah, very similar. In my military experience, my squad leader, immediate guy in charge, not the higher up, but he would say, "I'm not going to ask you to do something that I wouldn't be willing to do myself." It's a little different twist. Maybe he didn't want to do it either, but he wouldn't ask you to do something that he wouldn't want to do himself. So it was a very direct, and I think there's different leadership. You need to have different leadership at different levels too, right? If you're in a lower squad level or a lower individual level, more of a manager, a supervisor role, there's a different leadership style than you need to run the entire company or the entire division or an entire lodge. Right? Probably. So it doesn't.
But the paper isn't about being the leader. It's about who leads the leader.
No, it's about
right. And so
it's about that.
It touches on it for sure. It has to, but who leads the leader is especially it's a very pointed question, especially when you talk about Freemasonry, because we all talk about the past masters that haven't learned that once they to the ranks they from the ranks they rose, to the ranks they shall return, and they haven't learned that lesson, right?
And we'll get there. We're not quite there to the who's leads the leader yet.
Okay, all right.
Just like with good movies and good things, they quote a single line to give you the title of the movie or title of the song, but it may be a tiny little piece of it. So yeah, technically it's about who leads the leader, but really the who leads the leader is the last section, right? And you're right, Steve. He does talk about who should be expected to lead the leader or who's qualified to lead the leader. But the rest of the paper is really about general leadership of the lodge and management, unfortunately, good or bad, of the lodge. So like the next section, he says, well, next question, what is responsibly expected from the lodge leader? What should we expect reasonably from the lodge leader, from the master? He talks about prompt opening and closing of meetings, proficiency in opening and closing ceremonies, courteous reception of visitors, considerate attention to candidates, orderly, harmonious disposal of lodge business, informative special programs, community projects and public ceremonies, Masonic encouragement and inspiration of the brethren. I guess, if I had been given this list of expectations as a new master or as a new junior deacon or senior deacon or steward, or even a new, just as part of my master mason development expectations, it would have given me a new perspective, things that I might need to work on and prepare. Well, yeah, prompt opening and closing and proficiency in opening and closing ceremonies. Yes, that's kind of an automatic. We think we do that as Masons a lot. We talk about proficiency in your degrees, and we want you to do quality ritual. And yes, those are important. But what about the consideration and attention to candidates or reception of visitors? Do we really teach guys how to welcome people?
Well, if they've paid attention, then yes. If they,
we're putting it on them. Are we teaching them how to do? Now we're delving just a little bit into the who leads the leader, right? So we, like you said earlier, as past masters or senior members, are we teaching them, or are we just expecting that they're going to learn?
Well, that's a catch-22. If you've got an active mentorship program, then you have an officer's coach, and then that officer's coach should be, if he's doing his job, coaching these guys as to what to pay attention to and learn in that particular role, so that hopefully they are learning some of the things as they go through the chairs. Like, for example, proper reception of visitors. When you go into the role of senior deacon, that's your role. And well, in our lodge it is anyway. So the senior deacon, junior deacon are responsible to receive the distinguished visitors, open the doors, do the greetings, and so on. And so as the lodge officers coach at the beginning of each year, you go through with each officer and let them know what's expected of them. And they should know these kinds of details as to, pay attention. You're in charge of doing these things. So, maybe next year you're in charge of doing these things. So you might want to be watching the guy ahead so that you're properly prepared for that chair. That's how we do it in our lodge. Before they've gone into their chair, they've spent the previous year observing the next chair so that they've hopefully learned what's involved and what needs to be taken care of. Because most lodges, they have annual events, like we have an annual outdoor meeting with a barbecue. It's a big event. A lot of people come. We have an annual table lodge meeting. We have these regular events, and the junior warden's in charge of the stewards. So they're in charge of the food, whether we're in lodge, out lodge, whatever. So that guy should be coaching those guys as to what to pay attention to, right? So that next year, when it's their turn to do it, they're properly prepared, right? And they're not floundering, right? One time we tried to do this living book thing, and it got passed down or it stayed in the officer's chair. It got passed down to the next guy as he came along. But eventually one or two would get lost, and then be starting over again, and then it kind of petered off, right? So we went along with the lines of, you've been prepared the previous year to do this job, except when you're steward, because that's where you start, right? But as the stewards are watching the inner guard, and then the inner guard's watching the deacons, and they're watching the chair that they're going to advance into if they progress, so that they can assist them, so they can learn. That's how we do it anyways.
I feel obligated to bring up two things. First thing is, in the whatever it is, fourth paragraph here, the one that begins with our selection of officers, it's the best line in this whole article, in my humble opinion, is that the master was originally appointed to the line because of his regular and early attendance in our meetings, plus perhaps his ability to make good ham sandwiches. That's how you get to be the steward, and eventually you're the master, and it all started from the ability to make a good ham sandwich. But I that just tickled me. I laughed for a little while over that one.
Well, because they always start in the steward's chairs, and that requires making sandwiches and serving alcohol or tending the kitchen, right? So
Yep. But on a more serious note, I am not a great ritualist. I'm an okay ritualist. I'm better than some. I'm worse than many. But I credit a fair amount of what I know from actually just paying attention in lodge. There is a striking amount that you can learn. A lot of people, for various reasons, sit down and they go, okay, lodge is going to open now, and they turn off their brain until after the flag ceremony or whatever it is, and then they turn their brains back on again and re-engage. And just by paying attention to what's going on around you, not even the ritual necessarily, but the duties, like you were saying, the stewards watching what the junior warden is doing, or et cetera, is just being there and having your eyes open is sometimes half the battle.
Yeah. Well, that's why we encourage our newly made master masons not to take a chair, not to get too involved in other things other than just becoming a member of the lodge, participating and being active and paying attention in the meetings, right? And we find when we used to be encouraged to take guys and say, hey, give them a chair right away, give them a responsibility, a reason to come to lodge, right? And the problem is they would get focused on that particular task that they were put in charge of. And when that happened, they weren't paying attention to anything else. right? So that's why we always think it's more advantageous to have them, and particularly it was a Master Mason at the time because we were not allowed to do business in any other degree, right? And so we couldn't. Now it's different. We can open up in the end of apprentice degree and do business, right? Unless it's a vote, then it requires being in the Master Mason degree, right? So we just found that they had a much better experience coming into lodge, and had a much better understanding of what happened in lodge when they sat on the sidelines for at least a year or two, right? And just attended lodge and became a brother and melded with the group, right?
Yep. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Yeah, I'm of the opinion. Yeah, you give them something to do, but something small, whatever. You put them on some committee or something, and then so there is that hook. But yeah, during the meetings, let them soak it in and encourage them to soak it in. And I don't know.
Well, I mean, if you as you guys know, because you paid attention, is when you're sitting there, all the ritual work of opening a lodge, it teaches so many things just in the opening ceremony as you go through the description of the chairs, etc., and the little pieces each guy has, right? So much to be learned that way just by observing.
Yeah, for sure. But also the critical piece is to talk with that new man about paying attention. Sometimes we just assume because we were maybe told or whatever that we should pay attention, but to talk with them about that, see how he's doing that, or give them.
That's why we sit them with their mentor from the mentorship program. When a new member is in lodge for the first year, he doesn't sit by himself. He sits with a mentor or a past master if the mentor's not there, right? But I know that's not happening in every lodge.
Yeah. And we don't even have a true mentor, at least not officially by Grand Lodge standards anyway. Some lodges may have some kind of a more direct mentorship deal, but it's not official anyway. I don't know about you, Matt, if your lodge has an official mentorship program.
I thought some of you guys has adopted the 6-step program.
Well, 6 steps stops at the petition.
No. That's all.
There's no 7. There's no 7 step.
No, it's a whole membership program. It's not just 6 steps. 6 steps to initiation is just part of the program, right? It's not a thing on its own.
No, that's yeah. What I've been working on is the Masonic development program, that framework that includes the 6 steps as the first part of inquiry, and then moves through the educational pieces. And I'm not going to change. This topic wasn't about Masonic development program, but yeah, I'm hoping to implement a little more mentor programs.
So this paper really addresses the things more so like when somebody hasn't been properly coached and gets through to the end and was not properly prepared, right? And it talks about then who leads them, right?
And so the other funny thing that I thought, and we're getting kind of close to our segment here, but maybe we can talk about it or we can lead it into the next question, is it struck me that, and I had to laugh because he says it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek statement. This new guy that said, "Oh, I'll do it," or makes a great ham sandwich, as Matt says. He's kneeling at the altar, surrounded by visitors and brethren, depending on if you're open and closed installation, and he's obligated to agree to 15 paragraphs of charges and regulations, and not a single word about leader or leadership is ever mentioned in that obligation. Isn't it kind of crazy? Again, we just assume that these guys are automatic leaders. And then we require that he attend Grand Lodge meetings when required, but immediately give him an out by adding on convenient occasions. Our immediate past Grand Master, Chris Kaufman, isn't that the section he wanted to remove? No.
It's Cameron, I think, wants to do that. The current Grand Master, isn't it?
Well, no, Chris wanted to remove something about that the master didn't have to, or was it the secretary? There's something he wanted to remove, but something like that, something about this.
Yeah, it was that you didn't have to. It was to attend the annual communication and all committee meetings when convenient.
Yeah, on communication. And so I had to laugh at that. I thought, man, we should have got Past Grandmaster Chris on to talk about that. But
it is kind of funny. It's nothing in Masonry is new. Yep.
And then he's also, he said, and then we are when with the final element of his obligation, we crown him, the crowning gesture, we tell him he's now to be installed as master of Temple Lodge, ABC Lodge, in full confidence of your skill and capacity to govern the same, and then spend the next 12 months grumbling because he's not a leader. Isn't it typical? It's so typical of what we're doing, and how we expect this guy to automatically be a leader. So I think we're pretty close to the end here, and I'll let Matt wrap up, and so we'll dive into the next series of questions. Why isn't Lodge leadership automatic?
Sounds like a good topic for our next conversation. So with that, on behalf of David and Stephen, not David and David, but David and Stephen and myself, I want to thank you all for listening. Please, again, let us know what your thoughts are on our topic and the conversation. I know if you get two Masons in a room, you'll get three opinions on leadership in Masonry. So please let us know what your opinions are in the comments, and we'd be happy to talk back and forth with you about it. And with that, again, on behalf of Stephen and David and myself, thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.